Right, okay. Well, first of all, I am from England, and this means I have a complete inability to use any other language. So apologies for that, but it's important. I do get very excited, very carried away, and I begin to speak quickly. So I'd like to practice to begin with is you telling me as an audience if I'm speaking too quickly for you, okay? So what is your word for slow down? Slow down, okay. I'm not sure I can say that. I'm not sure if I can say that, but let's practice that, okay? So am I speaking okay at the moment? Can you follow me? Yes, that is good. What if I started saying continually expansively, verbalizing with intense fitting loquacity? I want to hear you say, slow down. Just for your education, continually and expansively verbalizing with intense fitting loquacity means I talk a lot. That's the hard way. That is not the lazy way of saying that. Okay, excellent. Now it's not working. I'm getting no little green light. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to begin by some introductions. So let's start with introductions about me. There are some reasons perhaps why you would want to listen to me, possibly. So I've been in project management for 28 years now. Normally there's a gasp from the audience at this point. Unbelievable. He's so young looking. How could he possibly? Oh, this is going to be a tough audience. 28 years in project management. And in the last 8 years, I have, thank you. The last 8 years, I've focused very much on PMOs, project management offices, program management offices, that sort of thing. So I've set up 3 PMOs in large organizations. And that's a great place to be, very exciting place to be at the moment. So these are reasons why perhaps you would want to listen to me. Another reason perhaps is because I like to spend a lot of time in my comfy chair. Yeah, as a project manager, that's where you should be, enjoying the comfy chair, not working too hard, but working very, very effectively and efficiently. And that's kind of the theme of the conversation that we're going to have this afternoon. Maybe there are some reasons why you won't want to listen to me, though. I've got to be very honest. I like to be honest with my audience. And these are the reasons you probably don't want to listen to me. This is some research a while ago, and it identified that apparently at the age of 18, my sex drive started going downhill. Now, clearly that is not relevant to today's presentation. At 19, problem solving started reducing, endurance around 22. My memory went at 28 apparently, but I can't remember. My slides are going. My memory went. I didn't realize I said that. See, that's proving my memory has gone. My muscles went at 30. At 32, my relationships died. My wife confirms that. At 45, my brain started dying. Now, we're okay today. The problem is always, whenever I do the presentation, if I do the presentation in front of an audience whose average age is over 45, it's a waste of time because I talk absolute rubbish and they don't remember what I said anyway. I wanted to kick off this with a little bit. I know the theme is very much about the EU. Yeah, you've been talking about that today. I thought I'd share some thoughts from the EU Art of Productive Laziness. You know, what is it about the EU that actually is good as far as that's concerned? And I thought I'd share some thoughts. This is the EU versus the United Kingdom. This is the popular view of the EU. Yeah, this is the view that you might eventually develop. This is what we see. We see, for example, the EU, bless them. They attacked us for bananas. They told us we couldn't have England, we love our bananas. But they said you cannot have those bananas. They're all curly and horrible and they're not right. You need to have straight bananas. We weren't happy about that at all. And then they attacked our fish and chips. They said you cannot call it fish and chips. Fish is just too open. You need to use the Latin names. Well, you're not going to go down into a small shop at a seaside town and order the Latin name for the fish that you actually want and a portion of chips. We didn't like that. We were not happy about that at all. And then they attacked our beloved double-decker buses in London. We love these. The tourists love these. But they said, no, you cannot have 2 stories on a bus. It has to be 1 story and a much longer bus. Also, we were unhappy about that as well. And then they attacked our sausage. The great British banger. They said, you cannot call it a sausage. It is an emulsified high-fat offal tube. Yummy. Sausage, banger. We much prefer that. We didn't like that either. Then they got serious. They attacked our barmaids. They said too much flesh is on display. There's a risk of skin cancer. You must get them to cover up. If we did that, the sales of our beloved pint of beer would go down. A pint of beer, that's what we like, not a litre. Outrageous. And then sadly it got really, really serious, because at this point there was a rumour going around that they were going to reconfigure the country organisation of Europe. And the one way they were going to get the United Kingdom to get really involved was to merge us with... Oh, no, sorry. The Queen's Corgi. I'm losing it. The Queen's Corgi was attacked as well, because that was not a proper breed of dog. And that belongs to the Queen. Yes, the merging of the countries was next. That was terrible. The merging of the countries. We were really fearful for this, because the suggestion that came out of the EU was that we would combine forces with France. There will be a thing called the French United Kingdom. And you could see exactly what we thought about that. We were not having that. There's a thing, though, because there's an awful lot of negative press about the EU. It's very popular in the press to really pick on anything. And most of these things really aren't true. There's a small amount of truth in it, but it's exploded into the myth, into the public domain. And so, actually, if you've ever seen this is a Monty Python film, The Life of Brian. And in The Life of Brian, the freedom fighters of Israel, of Jerusalem, were sitting there plotting, and they're saying, we need to get rid of the Romans. What have the Romans ever done for us? And someone says, the roads are quite good. Yeah, okay, the roads. And the aqueduct's quite good. Yeah, okay, the roads and the aqueduct. And so it goes on. And eventually there's an enormous long list of things the Romans have done for them. And it's the same for the EU. There's a whole long list of things, actually. And this is, I'm going to pick on a couple that should actually make life productively easy, and does make life productively easy, actually. The first one is, just the travel, the breaking down the barriers, the ease which it is to get in and out of countries within the EU is so beneficial to the speed of travel, etc. It's simplicity. If you've ever gone to America and attempted to get in the country recently, you know it's going to take a long time. But it's not like that. So that was really good. The breaking down of the barriers as far as currency is concerned as well. That's really good. I know we are England, the United Kingdom, we are not in the euro. But even so, whenever I travel, and I travel a lot across Europe, just having a single currency is just so much easier than constantly changing currency and currency. So that's really, really good. So that definitely lends itself to being productively lazy. Cheap flights is another thing they brought in, but the other one I'm going to pick on is the consumer protection. We do so much these days. I know, come Christmas, I'm going to probably 80% of the things I buy are going to buy online through the internet, etc. And the EU has contributed quite a lot to the protection that I enjoy as a result of that. They've done a huge amount. So there are many, many ways that I honestly believe the EU is very positive and has done a lot of good work. And for that, we will sort of forgive them for the ridiculous rumour about the French United Kingdom and the attack on our sausages and our barmaids, etc., because most of those really weren't actually true, thank goodness. So I would encourage you to be very positive about it. There's an awful lot that they have done. It's fantastic, and I'm sure it's going to continue. Yes, you might be a little bit negative about the bureaucracy and things like that, but that's true of many, many organisations. Mostly, it's a pretty good thing. I'm now going to talk about the general project-based art of productive laziness. I'd like to know a little bit about my audience, though, because it's important that we know each other to get the most out of this session. So let's start by a simple question. How many people in the room are project managers or in project management related work? Hands up. Okay, that's pretty much everybody. If you're not, why are you here? Okay, that was quite a, I know it's the end of the day, but that was quite, yeah, I am. Hands up who's in project management. Come on. Be positive about it. Good. Be loud and proud about being project managers. Okay, now for all the people who put their hands up, I want you to put your hand back up again if your husband, your wife, your partner, your nearest and dearest, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whoever's closest to you in life, if they know what it is you do when you go to work each day. There's a couple of hands at the back. Yeah. I did this presentation once, and there was in the audience there was these two hands going, yes, yes, yes. They were married to each other. Can you imagine the conversation at dinner? Well, it's kind of hard to explain to people what you do as a project manager. There's a game you can play, and sadly you can only play it at project management parties. So if you go to project management parties, do this. Go and find a project manager, corner them, and you ask them two questions, simple questions, but you have to ask them very, very quickly, one after the other. And this is what happens. You say to them, what are you? I'm a project manager. What do you do? I manage projects. Honestly, in over half the cases, people will say that. What are you? I'm a project manager. What do you do? I manage projects. Oh, right. Yeah, okay. I got that. You know? It's, it's like going, asking someone, what do you do? I'm a postman. What do you do? I man the post. Would you? And that's no explanation at all. It's really difficult though. My family, my wife doesn't understand me, but that's nothing to do with this. My children don't understand what I do at all. I try and explain to them. They got quite excited when they learned I'd written my first book, The Lazy Project Manager, until they found out what the book was about, and then they lost interest, even though their names are in it. There's a thing. I've no idea if you have this, but it's a very American thing. It is. It's bringing your parent into school to talk about what they do at work. Do you have that at all? No? Okay. Well, we definitely have that. So in my youngest child's son's school, it is a term, once a term, a parent is invited in to talk about what they do at work. Never been invited. I volunteered, I've suggested, I've reminded. The look of horror on his face is just wonderful. I'll tell you who has been invited in though. They had a nurse came in. A nurse, a nurse talked about cuts and bruises and washing your hands and stuff like that, I guess. That was quite popular. They had a policeman came in. The policeman, very popular. Not talking to strangers, crossing the road safely, I guess, some things like that, very popular. Who else did they have? They had a fireman. The fireman came in. Do you know, interestingly, that was the most popular day of the year for the mums to volunteer in school. Work that one out. The fireman came in and talked about not playing with matches and fire safety and things like that. And then suddenly, I began to realise these people have something in common. What do they have in common? Any ideas? They have a uniform. Yes, they have a uniform. We, as project managers, should design a uniform. Underpant, capital P, big cape. Just imagine going into work.
Yeah, with a big S.
With a big S, absolutely. You go into work next Monday or something and people go, there's a project manager, everything's going to be fine now. Never mind all this rubbish about is this a professional or not. Get a uniform. So I suggest maybe you run a competition. Design the project management uniform. I think that would be really, really good to do. But it is really hard. It is really hard to explain to people what project management is. I love LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. Please connect to me if you want to. I've certainly accepted an invitation to join you on LinkedIn. And I run a lot of discussions on LinkedIn. And I ran one which went along the lines of explain project management to an alien. And I had some fantastic responses. You can find the full article on the web. But the sort of responses I got were everything from, one guy sent me, honestly, it was about 6 pages long. He wasn't wrong, but it wasn't exciting. You know, I'm at a party, not for project managers, a real party. Someone comes up to me and says, what do you do? Right, I'll tell you what I do. And I do this as well. And I don't think I would be in the kitchen with anybody else. They'd all go. They'd leave me. It was far too long. The one I liked was actually someone sent something in along the lines of doing something challenging with a bunch of new people to make a difference, something like that. That was quite nice. I like that one. Someone also sent in, I love this one, someone sent in a response in Klingon. Star Trek Klingon. Honestly, I had no idea what this was, but 2 weeks later someone sent me in a translation. So there were at least 2 nerds out there. And the translation wasn't bad, actually. It was quite sensible. A little bit long, but quite sensible. But it is challenging. You kind of have to think about when people ask you about project management, what are you going to say to them? What are you going to say to them? The Americans have this thing about an elevator pitch. Yeah, the conversation you have when you're moving down. They cheat. Have you seen the size of their buildings? You can get a full PowerPoint presentation, sit people down, have coffee, talk to them at length. In Europe, we don't have that luxury. You need to be much, much sharper in when talking to people what you do. But you should think about that, explaining to people. So good, we've got to know each other a little bit, which is excellent. Let's now move on. This triggered it for me. So back in 2008, I was leading a PMO, had about 115 project managers working for me. And I was identifying that some project managers were being very successful in doing a 35, 40-hour week. And other project managers were being just as successful, but they were working 50, 60 hours. So there was something going on there. And we did some analysis, and I did some sort of an assessment of it. And it was really the way that the people were, it was the level of delegation, it was the way they were involved in too many things made the difference, really. But it triggered something in me. And I found this quote by Robert Heinlein, the science fiction writer. And as it says, progress isn't made by early risers, it's made by lazy men trying to find easier ways to do something. And I thought, yeah, I like that. And from there was born the concept of the lazy project manager and the art of productive laziness. So it's not just being lazy. It is not sitting back in that comfy chair, drinking coffee and letting your project team generally get on with things. That doesn't work. It's about being productively lazy. And that's what I want to take you through now. But just to reinforce this, I want to show you that there is some real stuff behind this. There's some science to begin with, all right? Science of laziness is this. Vilfredo Pareto, the Italian economist, way back in time, he was one of the first to do any sort of statistical analysis. And he observed at that point in time that in Italy, 80% of the property was owned by only 20% of the population. Now, Joseph Duran, the American management thinker, took a lot of this basic stuff, and eventually out of this came the thing we all know, the 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule. And the 80-20 rule generally works. I don't know about your businesses, but I know the last 3 companies I've worked for, 80% of the revenue came from just 20% of the customer base, for example. I think Microsoft, 80% of their revenue comes from 20% of their product line. So the 80-20 rule kind of works. In your personal life, as an example as well, did you know that you actually wear only 20% of your clothes for 80% of the time? Now, sadly, I seem to spend large amounts of time at weekends going shopping with my wife for the shoes, handbags and clothes, etc., that she doesn't ever wear that much. But that's relationships. In your own personal life, the 80-20 rule does work. And the way I suggest you do this is this. If you think about the last working day that you had, yeah, I bet you can think of 1 or 2 or maybe 3 things that you did during that day that gave you the most return on your personal investment, that moved things forward the most for you and your project, that got you the most benefit. The problem is we all have to-do lists, yeah? Everybody has a to-do list. Some people have enormous to-do lists. And of course what happens is that grows all the time. When you walk into the office first thing in the morning, people will talk to you by the coffee machine. The telephone will go. Emails will have been coming in overnight. Yeah, you'll get invited to meetings. The to-do list grows and grows and grows. But the point is, if you just start working down the list, you're not really making progress. You know, here I am in the office in the morning. Great. Oh, I need a new pen. Check. I need a new writing pad. Check. I want a cup of coffee. Check. I need to order the cabbage online. Check. Are you making progress at all? No, you're just ticking things off the list that aren't really that important. So you need to think about what is the 20% that delivers 80% of the benefit? What are the really important things you need to do? And to prioritize those. Now, I'm not saying you don't do everything. Certainly not. I'm just saying you focus on the most important first, and once you've done that, you move on to the next most important and so forth. And what will happen as a result of that is things will move forward that much better for yourself, for your project team, for anyone working with you. There will be this momentum starting up. And actually, you will feel a lot better as well because you'll have a very positive frame of mind. You won't see the to-do list as something that is completely equal. If you've got 20 things on the list to do, they are not all equal. Some are far more important than the others. So you will feel positive. So try that. Give yourself the opportunity. 5 minutes in the car, in the train, 5 minutes by your desk before anybody talks to you, whatever. Just think about what it is you're going to do. Now, I know in that 20%, there might be something that's kind of difficult, challenging, something you've been putting off, yeah? The nasty stuff. There's a book by a guy called Brian Tracy. Anybody read a Brian Tracy book at all? He's really good. I actually recommend it. They're very short and to the point. Brian Tracy wrote a book called Eat That Frog. And the frog is an analogy for something nasty and horrible that you've got to do. It comes from a North American native Indian story. And what they say is, in their wise way, they say, if you eat a frog first thing in the morning, your day is guaranteed to get better. Absolutely. And Brian has some great advice in there. He says, look, if you have something difficult and nasty and challenging to do, a frog to eat, don't look at it too long. It won't get any better. And if you have two difficult things to do, two frogs to eat the uglier one first. So the point is you need to get on and do this stuff and just get that momentum going. Now, a story I like to share these days, and it's not me picking on the French, but it sort of is. I've done that presentation at that point. I've done in many, many countries around the world. And suddenly I found myself an audience of 350 French people going, what is wrong with eating the frog? They're special. Recommend that book, though. So the 80-20 rule, yeah? Focus on the 20% that delivers the 80% of benefit. Absolutely. Get that priority right. So there's the science of laziness. Now we're going to look at the intelligence of laziness. There's a character in history called Helmuth Karl Bernhard Graf von Moltke. Moltke was the field marshal of the Prussian army at the end of the 19th century. He and then his son after him, they restructured the Prussian army into one of the most efficient military forces we've ever seen. And a lot of what they did is actually still reflected in the armed forces around the world. But one of the things I loved that he did, he analysed his people very, very simply. And what he said was, look, generally speaking, people are either not very smart or smart. Now, he didn't say not smart. He was a lot blunter than that. I'm being politically correct. Not smart or smart, and they are typically lazy or diligent, busy, hardworking, or lazy. Now, interestingly, he said, you know what? The lazy, not very smart people, these up here, let them be quiet. They may come up with a good idea one day. They are mostly harmless. That's interesting. Had no problem with them at all. Now, between you and me, I think those people were nearer the front line when the Prussian army went into battle. But Moltke did have a problem with these people. So these people here, they're not smart and diligent, the hard-working, busy people. Yeah? He said these tend to keep an organisation busy with really silly stuff. Take them out. And I'm looking, yes, I'm seeing it. People start nodding, going, yes, I know that person. I'm sitting next to them right now. Nah, people will look then, it's great. These people, it's not malicious, it's in their character. You have to deal with them. And again, Moltke has great advice. Take them out. Oh, come on. You're the field marshal of the Prussian army, end of the 19th century, bang, you're gone. One bullet. Now, I want to be very clear at this point. The lazy project manager is not suggesting you kill people on your project team. All right? HR do not like that. You have to nurture and develop them. Now, I had a particular example. I had an extreme example of this on a project I worked on. And you find that all these stories are in the book as well. And it's kind of experiences where I learned something really important. And this one was, I had an extreme example of this. There was a guy on the project team who he was just like that. Before a meeting, he wanted to talk, he had ideas constantly. During a meeting, he added to the agenda, he distracted, he went off everywhere. After the meeting, he was on the phone straight away. My team came to me and said, you've got to do something about this guy. We can't concentrate. He's too distracting. You've got to deal with it. And we tried a few things, nothing worked. And eventually, in a moment of desperation, which is when some of my good ideas come out, I came up with a plan. I got this guy in. I said, look, I've got something really important for you to do. Only you can do this. Come on, follow me. Over here. All the way over here. All the way over here. On your own. Here you go. And I created a tiny made-up sub-project. Bye. Left him to it. He loved it because suddenly he felt very, very important. And he got on with it. But the advantage for the project team was the fact they were no longer distracted and they loved me for that. That was an extreme example. Hopefully you never have that. That was a complete waste of resource. I couldn't remove him from the project. I couldn't do anything else. So I had to deal with it that way. But I did what I did for the benefit of the old project team. And they loved me and they concentrated and we moved forward. But you do have to deal with people like that. But more interesting is this side of the diagram. Moltke actually said, you know what? People who are smart and hardworking, they're great, but deploy them into a staff function in his terms. They will make sure all detail is thoughtfully addressed, but they are not your leaders. Your leaders are the combination of lazy and smart. Because these people will know how to be successful through the most efficient deployment of the resources. They will work smarter, not harder, make things efficient. And these are people are your leaders. And I think as project managers, that's exactly where we should try and get to. Certainly when I started out in project management, I would have put myself down there as kind of smart, hardworking. I'm not saying I was super intelligent, but I applied what the intelligence I had. I worked hard. I worked on a project for almost 3 years, and at the end of it, I thought, I like that. In general terms, I liked being a project manager, but on the other hand, I didn't like the working in the week during the evenings, working at weekends, cancelling holidays in one case, or at least making phone calls from holidays in many other cases. I didn't like the way that it consumed my life. And from that, I built new ways of working and ways of considering of where I should and shouldn't be involved. And from that really is some of the foundations for the concept of the lazy project manager. Okay. So we've had the science of laziness, yeah? The intelligence of laziness. Well, you know what's coming next, don't you? Yeah, a dinosaur, of course. All project management books should have a dinosaur in them. Does anybody know or like Monty Python? Do you remember Monty Python? Don't be shy. My kids have got Monty Python on their phones. My son says it's okay to like Monty Python. It's cool. But it's not cool to say cool, Dad, so stop saying that. This one, if you don't know, you can go onto YouTube. You can check it out, or you can go onto my website and check it out. But it's John Cleese dressed up as a woman called Miss Anne Elk. Miss Anne Elk has this theory. She's been interviewed by Graham Chapman on a pretend TV program. And the joke of the sketch is that she spends forever not saying what the theory is. She coughs, she splutters, she declares it's my theory and only my theory, etc. But eventually Graham Chapman persuades her to say what it is. And she says this: all brontosauruses are thin at one end, much, much thicker in the middle, and thin again at the far end. Wow. And I thought about that and I thought, you know what? Projects are absolutely nothing like that at all. Projects should be like this from a lazy project manager's point of view. Thick at the front end, thin in the middle, and much, much thicker at the far end. And I want to explain to you why I think that's the case. We'll start here. This is the front end, the thick front end of a project. This is a place where actually a project manager, even a lazy project manager, is going to work fairly hard to get the foundations right, to set the scene for the project's success. Ahead of the game is the very first chapter. Ahead of the game is all about that point in time when you become project manager, how you should act and how you should behave. So back to my lovely audience that's listening to me. How many of you get to choose the projects that you manage? No, that was an interactive moment. No, I'm joking, of course. You don't get to choose the project you manage, do you? Of course not. I don't know your worlds, but I'll explain the world that I used to come from. I used to work for a large software company, and so the following would take place. We would attempt to identify prospects, future customers. And against that prospect, we would apply huge amounts of resources and time. We would have sales executives and sales managers and pre-sales technicians, solution architects and business analysts, and every possible person would bombard the prospect until they finally gave in and said, okay, we'll become a customer. And they'd write a very large check. And strangely, at that point, they'd like some sort of return on their investment. So at that point, a project will be created. And at that point, we would obviously identify the most suitable project manager possible, never the next person who had a spare day. We would find the best project manager for that project, and they will be given the project. And at that point, magic happens, you know. Magic happens. Because at that point, it becomes the project manager's fault when it goes wrong, despite all of that preceding activity. Now, the head of the game is all about the way you set the standard for moving forward, how you have that very first meeting with your project team, how you decide that you want this project to run moving forward, why you want to go that way, how you set that standard in place, why are you doing this, explain to your people so that they are on board and supporting you with at least a chance for project success at the end. Very, very important moment, the head of the game. Now, part of that process, of course, is to engage with your project sponsor, the second most important person on the project, yeah? The project sponsor. So I know I was joking earlier on, how many of you get to choose the projects you manage? You don't, of course. How many of you get to choose the project sponsor you work with?
All of us.
Always. Most people don't. Most people don't. Would be nice though, wouldn't it? Yeah? Hello, come in, take a seat. Excellent, right, thank you very much. The interesting resume you have here. So tell me about your experience of being a good project sponsor. And your strengths, your weaknesses, and some more weaknesses, okay, and more, okay. Look, if I'm honest, really, this is an important project I'm managing, and I want it to be successful. So actually, what I suggest in this case is that you go away and you take a training course in being a good project sponsor. And once you've done that, maybe next project that comes around, we can talk again and see if you're ready for the job or not. Wouldn't that be nice? Of course, it's never going to happen, sadly. I think it's a really important topic, actually, project sponsorship. I started a thing called the Campaign for Real Project Sponsors, because there is so much going on in the world of project management. It's fantastic. We can always get better. We can always improve. But actually, the area of project sponsorship is generally weak because organisations don't support their project sponsors. They become project sponsors because they've reached a certain level in the organisation, but they probably have never been trained in how to be a good project sponsor. And a lot of them don't actually have a background in any experience of projects at all. So it's kind of challenging. I've only come across 2 or 3 companies that actually really invest heavily in their project sponsors, and it does pay off. So, that's a topic I think is really important. But here's some tips. When you get together with your project sponsor for the first time, let's say you've never worked with them before, okay? The first thing you should do is you should do some background research on your project sponsor. Find out about them. Now, this does not mean that you hire a private detective to get embarrassing photos that you can use later on to the advantage of you and your project. No, useful though they may be. No, what I'm suggesting is you find out about their project experience as being a project sponsor. You may not have worked with them beforehand, but if they sponsored another project manager will have done. So why not go and talk to that other project manager? What was their experience? What worked and what didn't work? How did the sponsor like to be communicated with? What was their style of management? Were they good supporters? Did they have strength? Did they have influence? All those sort of things. You can learn an awful lot before you meet that sponsor face to face. Do it in a gentle, subtle way, of course. And when you do meet them for the very first time, don't go straight into okay, let's talk about milestones and deliverables and end dates and all that sort of thing. That will come later. Start the conversation in a different way. Start the conversation by talking to them about their hopes for the project. What do they hope? What do they expect to get out of it? And what are their fears, their concerns about the project? Hopes and fears. Very open questions. And the advantage of open questions is you learn a lot more. They will probably, hopefully, freely talk to you about things that you might pick up. Now, an example of this, when it doesn't work, is a project sponsor I work with. From my point of view, I was so pleased. It was a very short project. It was a business intelligence deployment. It was only 3 months long. And I honestly believe the project sponsor I was working with in the customer project sponsor was evil, basically. I thought he was the worst possible person on the planet. I honestly believed he was trying to sabotage the project. He was so difficult to work with. Nothing pleased him. Everything was wrong. Everything was challenged. Everything required so much of my time. And at the end of that project, I did what any sensible project manager would do. And as I got in my car, I turned the music up very loud. I drove down the road very, very fast and vowed never to go back to that customer ever again. Now, fortunately, someone from my company went back and they came to talk to me later on. And they said, "Wow, that poor guy." I said, "What poor guy?" "The project sponsor." "He's not a poor guy. He was evil, nasty, horrible." I said, No. He was really under pressure. And what it turned out was this guy had championed and was sponsoring a major enterprise deployment inside the organization, and it was going badly, badly wrong. The result was that they were locked into this project. They were spending far more money than they originally anticipated, and they were seeing much slower returns on benefits to the business. And actually, he'd been given this short little project to re-energize him and also almost prove that he could do the job. Now, I had no idea he was under that sort of pressure. Had I understood his situation, had I understood where he was coming from, I would have actually behaved in a very different way with him. But I took it at face value, and I just thought he was being difficult. So understand as much as you can about the project sponsor. It really does pay off in the long run. And that first meeting, talk about hopes and fears. What do they hope to get out of the project? What are their concerns? What are their worries? Definitely worthwhile doing that. Managing the creep is all about change. Projects are about change. Change management is important within the project, of course. So you need to deal with that. Absolutely. The best way I find is the first time a change is raised is get your team together, physically or virtually, and take them through the processes. This is why we have a change request form. This is why. This is what we're going to do with it. These are the options. These are the approval levels. This is the outcomes, accepted, rejected, sent back for reconsideration, put into the parking lot for consideration later. Whatever is your change control process. If you take people through that at the very first chance, they will begin to understand and try and convey on them the sort of potential consequences of not adhering to the system. That little bit of education really pays off. It's definitely advantageous. And then we come to communication. Communication. Did you realize that between 70 and 90% of your time you're communicating in some form being a project manager? It's a huge amount. So if you're going to start anywhere being productively lazy, this is a great place to start. Now again, this does not mean that you stop talking to people when you go to the office tomorrow. This does not mean you stop communication. It means you think about the communication that you're doing and you do better, more efficient communication. Because when communication goes wrong, it costs the project all the time. It costs in misunderstandings and confusion and rework and wasted time everywhere. Communication is so, so important. When I led the PMO, one PMO, we did things called health checks, and we did them at the end of the planning cycle, which is in our methodology. Originally, these were called audits, by the way, but audits kind of scare people, don't they? Audits are scary. So we rebranded them and called them health checks, which are warm and cuddly and friendly. And by doing these health checks, we began to uncover common things on projects. The whole idea was to, before we start the major part of the project itself, before we begin to lock in huge amounts of resources and costs, therefore, let's just look at the project and see if we can improve things for more likely success. And one of the things that we found was in 100% of cases where we did these health checks, there was a communication plan. Brilliant. There was always a communication plan. Now, bear in mind that we used to do these health checks 3 months or more into the project. Our pre-work and our planning cycle was quite long. We found in 90% of cases that communication plan had never ever changed from the start of the project, which is crazy. You know, you're bringing together a project team. Some have never worked together beforehand, but by 3 months down the line, surely there are some relationships and trust being built up that you don't need the same form of communication that you laid out at pre-project or in the early stages. An example of this, an example of really good communication approach, was when I worked on a project. And the customer project manager, who I had the one-to-one relationship with, he was the most mature I've come across. Now, he recognized that for me to go onto this customer site, it was over 100 miles to drive. It took me a long time. And after about 2 or 3 months into the project, we had this relationship and trust that if I was coming in to sit with him on a review meeting, then if there were no known issues or problems from my point of view, he was quite happy for me to turn up an hour or so beforehand, have a cup of coffee with him, update him, and we go into the meeting together. However, he also trusted and expected of me that if there were issues and problems, I would turn up first thing in the morning or even the day before, whatever was required to prepare him to the same level to go into that meeting. He recognized the value for both of us to not waste time in fixed meetings. How many of you actually work on projects where the steering committee meeting is on the second Monday every month, fixed? If that's the case, why? Because projects aren't structured like that. Projects are going up and down in their points of where the steering committee needs to be focused on. You should reflect and adapt that accordingly. The same for communicating. Here's a lesson. Reporting is not communicating. The fact that these days we can produce the most wonderful 16-page report with graphs and diagrams and charts and fonts and beautifully laid out, and it's got every single point of data required by anybody, and you send it out to everybody. Have you communicated with anybody? Probably not. People look at it and go, oh, I can't read that. You need to focus the communication on the individual. You know, you might want a straight one-to-one telephone conversation. You're happy with an email bullet point. You actually want to have a formalized meeting with minutes. You'd like a 5-point box PowerPoint summary. Everybody is different, so you need to tailor that communication to the individual. Now, that might seem like more hard work, but actually, once it's in place, it isn't. And actually, once it's in place, you are actually achieving more effective communication and less confusion and less problems as a result. So it pays off. Another book that's recommended is a book by a guy called Andy Crow. Andy Crow wrote a book called The Alpha Project Manager. And it's basically a book written on some research he did. He interviewed a large number of project managers, and he tried to find out what the top 2%, the most successful project managers, the alpha project managers, what did they do differently to everybody else to make them more successful? And if you read the book, there are many things that they did differently, subtly differently. But in the area of communication, it was really interesting. The most successful project managers spent less time at their desk. They relied less on electronic devices for communication, and they spent more time getting up and going and talk to people face to face, or at least getting on the phone and talking to people on a regular basis. They recognize this is all about people. People need communicating with and clarification of communication and regular communication. So again, that's a good book. I would recommend that. So that's the front end of the project, the thick part. We're now going to look at the middle part. Now, the middle part is the point in time when the lazy project manager should be working a little bit less because his project team should be efficiently driving the project forward. The point about this is, if you're a project manager that's operating at 100% of capacity already, what are you going to do when there are any problems or challenges to the project? Where are you going to find the extra time from? The first thing is all in a fun day's work. I guess you can tell from my presentational style, I think fun is quite important. Fun is really good for a project team. A happy team, a team that enjoys a bit of fun, appropriate fun, is a very productive team, I believe. So the right level of fun is quite important. Let me give you a couple of examples of that. The first example was when I worked on a very virtual team. I had project managers all over Europe, Middle East and Africa. We never ever got together. At no time did we actually all get in one room. So we started a thing called It's Friday. And on Friday, it was permitted and encouraged. That was the day when you could send around all of those great jokes, the Dilbert cartoons, the YouTube clips, the stuff that people laugh, yeah? And people would do that. Someone would send something to everybody on the project management distribution list, and someone else would comment about it, someone else would send another joke, and it was great fun on Fridays. And it was really good at bonding and connecting the remote team. Now, I freely admit perhaps on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays, they just didn't copy me on all these good jokes. But generally speaking, it worked on Fridays. A second example where a moment of fun turned the project around. So this project was going really badly wrong. Don't get the idea that all of my projects go wrong. Most of them were mediocre successes. But this one was really bad. If you've ever experienced this is the point in time where the project is not making any progress. The project team all hate each other. Everybody blames everybody else. Yeah, it's not good. And it's a terrible place to be. And we'd reached this point in this particular project, and we tried several things, of course, but eventually I took my core team, I booked a hotel, we had a big room, and I brought in an external sort of someone to facilitate some sort of re-team building activities to try and re-engage the team and get past this. And, you know, by lunchtime, this made no difference whatsoever. It was just as bad. The tension in the room was horrible. And again, in a moment of desperation, I suddenly stood up in front of the group and said, I'm going to solve every problem on this project right now. And everybody looked at me. And I walked out the room, I closed the door, and in a very loud voice from the other side of the door, I pretended to be my boss, my manager, firing me. I gave it a minute, and I walked back in the room again. Most people got the joke. A couple of people looked disappointed I was still employed. But honestly, just that moment, it broke the ice. You know, it gave an opportunity for everybody to just relax. And that moment of humour, I definitely look back upon as the point when we turned the project around. Now, the project took an awful lot of effort. We delivered, less scope than was originally intended. It cost more, it took longer, etc. It was a hard battle even from that point. But I honestly look at that point of humour and saying, you know what? That was a great point. That was the point when the project began to recover slowly from that point of view. There's a story about a project manager, and a project manager was working on a project, and he had a solution architect and a database administrator with them. And they'd been working hard, so they went for a walk along the beach at lunchtime, as you do. And while they were walking along the beach, they came across something shiny in the sand, yeah? And the database administrator picked it up and rubbed it. It was a lamp, And out of the lamp came a genie. And the genie said, I will give you 3 wishes. Oh, hang on, there's 3 of you. Okay, you can have 1 wish each. Who's going to go first? And the DBA, since he picked the lamp up, said, I'm going to go first. Can I wish for anything? He said, yeah, anything you want. Oh, this is great. I said, I want to live in I'll go to South America. I'm going to have fast cars, Ferraris and Porsches. I want unlimited beer and money, and I want beautiful women to look after me. Can you do that? And the genie said, yeah, of course I can. And he was gone. And he said, who's next? Said the genie. And the genie looked at the last two people. And the solution architect said, oh, I'm next. What do you want? Said the genie. And the solution